So welcome. It's the assessment team's lunch and learn / office hours. It's an opportunity for us to give you some additional information, for you to pose questions and receive some technical assistance. And then we also make sure we have the questions that you pose produced in a Q&A document, which we will post at the conclusion of the meeting. We aim to get it done within the week. And we've been aiming to get the slide deck up into the website or on the website a week in advance of the meeting, so you can see what's coming up and what the content could potentially be. So just some reminders regarding that. If you would like to ask a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and at the end of the session, Regina will facilitate that chat, those questions, and we'll go through the chat to answer the questions. Jody's going to collate them into the Q&A document, and we're going to dive right in. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Good afternoon, everyone. A couple of NUIA reminders. We have 2 days left of the winter optional session that ends on Friday, the 11th. If you're administering the winter session and you want to check to make sure that you've tested all the students in your roster, you can click on the link in the slide deck for identify untested students. Sorry, that says fall 21 and into the spring of 22. And if you have tested students in any session and then retested, if you would please exclude test results and reports that were the first erroneous administrations of those sessions, that would be helpful to you, not to the DOE. The DOE does not receive any information from the optional winter window. Our spring window, as a reminder, is extended from 4 weeks to 6 weeks. That's running May 2nd to June 10th. Okay, we didn't have a lot of pre-spring NUIA 21 training going on, and jumped right into the fall training as well. So we're working with NUIA and come up with a lot of topics that we believe need some reminders and refreshers. And we've got these 2 slides of training agenda items. So starting with the NUIA MARC platform, we need some clarification on the roles and the responsibilities. There's system administrators, data administrators, test administrators, proctors, and each have different roles and permissions within the platform. We want to cover the utilization of state-approved SAUs and school codes. We ran into a lot of issues last spring regarding that, but the message seemed to have gotten out, and that was corrected in the fall, but we'll just cover that again. In the MARC platform, we're going to review how to configure the test windows, because for the spring, they must be set for the state designated 6 weeks window of May 2nd through June 10th. Excuse me. We're going to cover rostering and reporting attributes. We'll talk about using the NEO roster versus using Clever, and setting parameter requirements within the platform to avoid any missing attributes. We had a lot of student results that didn't have the 9-digit SSID numbers associated with them. Some of the first names and the last names were not what they reflected in the enrollments in Synergy and NEO. We're going to cover the definitions of suspending versus terminating tests. This slows DOE's data review process and cleanup of the results file, and with unnecessary duplicate records for each student. Excluding test results in reports. This again slows down the DOE's data review process, cleanup of results, because we have duplicate records if you have retested any student on any session. The MARC platform systems configuration, there is a capability of limiting the number of test sessions that can be given and that ties into DOE's review of the readministration policy. There is a capacity for districts to set testing restrictions. It limits the drop-down menu of the available sessions, and that would help minimize administration of incorrect sessions, giving high school students a 2 to 5 or giving a screener as opposed to the 3 that are the required sessions. We're going to talk about the data transfer process. If you're moving student results from one SSID to another, that's if a student took the session under someone else's login credentials, moving students from one SAU to another during the 6 weeks window. Our readministration policy and protocol is going to be overhauled for the spring. And our biggest news is our text-to-speech and read aloud protocol review. The assessment team, we're looking at technical specifications of text-to-speech in the NWEA MARC platform, specifically in reference to the reading session, during which the reading passages are not to be read aloud. So we realize that within the platform, there are settings that you can control the functionality of the TTS. And the assessment team is reviewing this policy and protocol with special services members at the DOE and SAU leadership and educators and NWEA. We're going to develop a more suitable and equitable strategy for our spring 22 admin regarding text-to-speech, specifically with the reading sessions. We're looking for an option other than disabling TTS altogether. And that will also affect our read aloud and human reader protocol. So as we get going with this, additional information will be provided as it's received with targeted training around TTS. We'll do that closer to the opening of the spring NWEA window. Lots of information. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Let's move on to our science training. Sorry, give me 1 second to catch up. Our science window has gone back to a 2-week window, splitting grades 5 and 8 in one window of May 2nd through May 13th, and the high school May 16th through May 25th. We have a survey that's open right now. It was published in the February assessment update regarding input on whether you feel that that 2-week window you would like to have extended. We're not promising that that can be done. We're working with the vendor to determine any consequences of that extending the results and posting results. So depending on the survey results and our answer from the vendor, we'll keep you posted on whether those windows can be extended. This is a reminder that the science assessment is online and there is no option for remote administration. We usually have the paper-based order process open by now. We're a little bit delayed. We're working out whether that's going to be a direct link via a Qualtrics survey posted on the DOE web pages, or whether it's going to be found in our science vendors Zendesk, and we'll keep you posted on that. As part of the development of the New Meridian Assessment Library and Maine's NGSS science-based assessment, we have a series of assessment literacy modules reviewing balanced assessment system with a focus on how to understand and use results from summative assessments. These modules aren't specific to the science assessment, with the exception of module 3. We were to have the Module 1 Balanced Assessment Systems Overview posted already by the first week in February. We're just a tad delayed on that, and that should be coming out soon. On the notes on the slide deck, if you've already downloaded those, there's bullet points of details of each of the modules, but I won't go over those. The Module 2 estimated release date is coming in the beginning of March. And Module 3, the estimated release date is March 10th. Next slide, please. Thanks. We have our main science spring training topics. We're going to be, the topics are similar to what we covered last spring when it was our first administration of the New Meridian NGSS Science Assessment, but these will be updates and refreshers. We have installation of the 2022 Lockdown Science Atom browser. So if you still have the Lockdown browsers installed on student devices from last year, it will need to be updated. The rostering in the Atom platform will be the next session. Oh, that's a jump in a wheel. The beginning of March is when we're going to do the technology aspect of installing the Lockdown browser. The beginning of April, we'll dive into rostering in the Atom platform. The week of 4/11 through 4/15, we have the accessibility review, the tools, supports, and accommodations. And lastly, administering and proctoring the science assessment that's projected for the week of April 25th through the 29th. And that's it for me.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. And on to NAEP and the international assessments. Thank goodness we don't have any international assessments this spring. It does really, provide a little bit of relief for you folks, but I'm sure that NAEP is giving you enough stress. Our window is open, and about just over 90 schools have participated in NAEP so far, which is kind of interesting. Just to make a note about that, the window has been extended to give us a little extra room and flexibility, because the participation rates are not quite hitting the threshold, and we need to make sure that we have those thresholds met for reporting, so that we can value and honor the efforts that the schools, the districts, and the students are making to make this a successful administration. So current tasks that are happening as parents are being notified. Most schools have done that. There is a student list that needs to be reviewed and confirmed, and maybe a few students added. I uploaded the big enrollment list back in January with the help of Varun. But there may be a few students that have relocated, or so if you could make those notes. I want to the add student button is a little bit hidden, but you can find it under review student. And I have sent out the reminders to the few schools that haven't done that activity yet, but I can't do the next data step until they do. So I'm hoping by the end of the month, we're all good to go. All right, school and teacher questionnaires are coming in already. I'm very excited about that. That's the school coordinator has to enter the email information for each of the teachers, and usually one of the principals is completing the school questionnaire, and then they're encouraging participation, which is our challenge this year. Now, our state goal is 95% of the selected students. Our school goal, we are hoping that 90% of the kids are present that day that were selected for NAEP. And that's where the makeup comes in. If we have less than that 90, we might have some challenges with the reporting threshold. So we're going to prioritize the makeups, and we have that extra couple weeks now to try to reschedule those. And I want to make that clear. So one of the questions I had just this morning was, oh no, do we have to do this all over again? No, just this. It's going to be a single session of just the students that we're missing, as many as we can get, so that we can meet that 90%. Okay, As far as our inclusion goals, for the special populations, we'd like 85% of the students with disabilities that were selected for NAEP. We need 85% of those students to participate. And that same threshold of 85% holds true for the English learners also. Moving on, I want to thank all of you, for the extra efforts that your schools, your districts, and even your students that it takes to pull this off, especially during this pandemic. And there is some more information available, but most of it hasn't changed. And there's some in the notes of this slide. And Cheryl, go ahead and advance, please. I do want to address the question a little bit about NAEP sampling. I get this question quite frequently. How come we're selected again as a school? Isn't it random sampling? And the answer is no, the schools are not selected randomly. There's a very sophisticated process that breaks the schools down into to layers. So it's a 3-part process. We start with a selection of schools. We work down through looking at those strata but it's done by school size and school location. And we also look at the different demographic populations within the schools. They prioritize the schools and order them. And then from there's a selection made. And so it's the schools. And then inside the schools, there is usually random sampling, but unfortunately, some of Maine schools are so small that if we need to get, to reach the 25 students, well, there may not be 25 students in that grade at that school. We do have schools in Maine that have a single student in a grade, and that student is participating or has been selected. So random applies when it can, as far as the students, but not the schools. And then after the students are selected, then they're assigned a subject for the assessment. And there's additional information, again, in the notes for this slide, but I'm going to pass this on to Jody.
Hi, everyone. So as many of you, hopefully all of you, are already aware, the access for ELLs and alternate access for ELLs window has been extended. It now closes on March 18th. This decision was made after consultation with the field and here among our leadership, and is in consideration in particular of many of our districts which have had experienced closures over the last several weeks with interruptions to testing, as well as our several districts that have rapidly fluctuating populations and have many more English learners enrolling every day. And so in order to ease that burden, we made the decision to move ahead and extend the window. For the districts that were not in favor of extending the window, we worked with DRC in order to ensure that the data will be available to school districts before the end of the school year, because that was a pain point last year, that data did not come back until this summer as a result of extending the deadline last year. And so that data will be received by districts at the end of May this year. Technical assistance is continuing right now in the field. Technical assistance is taking place in person as well as virtually for the winter 2022 access administration. Technical assistance can include different elements. So the assessment observations, using the assessment observation checklist tool, it focuses not only on topics such as assessment security and preparedness of the test administrator, but it really starts to drill down into the student assessment experience. It looks at things like accommodations or universal tools employed, if the student has had the opportunity to interact with sample items. And then there are also a few questions pertaining to the test administrator experience with the assessment. And so the assessment team is really using this data to inform and plan what professional offerings we need to create for next year in terms of assessment, professional learning. If for more information regarding technical assistance, whether you would like someone to come in and observe an administration. In several instances, I've gone into schools and I've modeled an administration for new test administrators, or anything else, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And then MSAA and MSAA Science, we are now formally in the pre-assessment season for MSAA and MSAA Science. I am just now finalizing our user accounts. Those are the test coordinator and test administrator accounts. And those will go live the week of February 22nd. So at that time, all users will receive a welcome email from the MSAA system with login instructions. As of February 22nd, test coordinators will be able to go into the system. They will be able to create their test administrator accounts. If the district has opted to create their own TA accounts, they will be able to view the student roster. They will be able to create classrooms to pair up TAs with the students they'll be administering the assessment to. Then on the 28th of February, the required online training modules will become available for test administrators and test coordinators, and those are also housed within the MSAA platform. There is a live test administrator training webinar on the 7th of March, and so that link can be found in our monthly update through our 1% listserv, or if you are still looking for it, please feel free to reach out to me and I can send it to you. And then our assessment window is going to be open from March 14th through April 29th. And that also represents a 6-week assessment window.
So as many are aware, the data that we've utilized over past administrations is now available in the ESSA data dashboard. Districts were provided an opportunity to review that data. There were a few discrepancies and catches that were shared with Penny Henry. Those were taken care of. So all of that now is available. We're working to put the NAWIA data per the federal request of last week onto that dashboard, and it'll be reported out by content area. So that should be happening within the next week. And then any other questions or concerns that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to Penny or I with those questions, and we can help you navigate that dashboard and answer any questions that you have. And then some general reminders that are there. Updating of NEO with staff changes and with the comings and going of staff related to the pandemic and other challenges that school districts are experiencing, and then just the natural fluctuation in staff during the school year. Just a reminder to update those NEO records for staff, specifically DACs. We send a lot of communication out to DACs or EL coordinators, special ed coordinators, folks at that level. And we get a lot of bounce backs just because emails have changed, or we'll get a forward message to say, I'm no longer working with the district, please reach out to. So generally, I will forward the email onto the individual who's listed in the email, but just like a reminder to say, if you could update NEO, that would be great. But then they have all the information that was to be shared for the individual in that role. So just a reminder about that. We have seen a little bit of an uptick in students PII being sent via email. So student names, birth dates, grade levels, those types of things being sent via an email. So just a reminder that we should just be sending student SSID numbers via email. And then one of our team members can look the student up and probably give you a call regarding any questions or challenges that you have regarding student enrollment records or eligibility for assessment. And then we do welcome, obviously, your participation in these sessions. So if there's any elements that you would like us to focus on or provide some additional professional learning or insight, please let us know. You can email any one of the team at any time to give us that information. And then in the most recent monthly update, you will have seen I think the email actually that I sent out to say the monthly update was available. You'd notice that there's a little bit shift in structure for March and April and May when it comes to our assessment office hours. So the March 9th assessment office hours will primarily focus on prepping for the MSAA administration. So it'll be very targeted to that. And then so if you usually register or you are registered for these sessions, there's nothing else you need to do regarding that, because that registration would translate over for the targeted MSAA session. We've added an additional session on the 23rd of March, which will be our general update session, which is more in line with the content of this session. There is a new link for that session. We did try and explore within Zoom of changing the scope of dates to add in that additional date, and it just wasn't possible. So there is an additional link there, but we will send out reminders ahead of time. And then again, there's a similar format for April. We'll be offering 2 sessions. I think there may be even more than 2 sessions in April in advance of assessment administrations. And then May, when we have the NAWIA window open and the science window open, we'll be doing weekly office hours, but they won't be structured in this way. It will be more of a drop-in situation where you can just hop into the call, come and ask questions, get your questions answered quickly, listen to other questions that may be posed for some additional insight. Completely optional, but the staff will be available at least at minimum on a weekly basis in a face-to-face virtual environment where you can pose questions. So I just want to put those on your radar so you're aware of that moving forward as we move into the assessment season. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to question and answers. So I'm going to turn it over to Gina. And Gina, if you want to facilitate, that would be great.
Super, I'll take that over. We don't have a lot in the chat yet, Jeanette, but you know, you folks can also raise your hand if you have a question, but as we go along. Our first question is, if we need to test a child in a different grade span in fall or spring, we know we can do that outside of the window, but how far outside the window, that, you know, making sure that we are not going to disrupt the official rosters for state testing.
Nancy, do you want to take that?
Sure. If you remember that I call it the national NAWIA windows for fall, winter, and spring. I think they're 3 months long. So the fall one started August 15th and ran through November 30th. And within that, we had the 6-week state window. So the same applies to the winter. It's open through February 28th. So after Friday, you can test students in different assessments, different sessions, excuse me, and different levels if you choose to. That data will not be coming to the DOE, and we won't say it's an off-grade test. We don't want to hear about it because it doesn't come to us. So anytime within those 3-month windows for the fall, the winter, and the spring.
Can I jump in for a second? I know that we've had this question before locally. I just want to make sure that I think the person may be worried about item exposure.
About what?
Meaning like item exposure, meaning if you take a test, should you wait 3 weeks until you test again?
Are you talking about, you're not talking about the weeks of instruction?
Nope, I'm talking about, for example, say you had a student take a test off grade level, and then you want, and obviously that wouldn't count. That would not be something that you guys we would import at the DOE. I'm not saying that's what their question is. I know that I've received this question. Is there, how close to the testing window can you have a kid test if you know they're going to test multiple times?
I think, are you talking about the practice effect? That's what you're talking about.
Erica, do you want to give some additional insight?
Yeah, so in this
Yeah.
case, Andy, that actually wouldn't be an issue because they'd be in a different grade span unless the items are dipping down, but this would be a K2 versus a 2-5 situation. And I'm just wondering when, like, how many days prior to the window opening does the data get grabbed? Like, so, you know, if I have up against this number of days prior to the window, to have that kiddo sitting on a roster where they're not supposed to be, kind of thing, so that we don't have a need to invalidate, because frankly, we want to have that growth piece for them. In this case, it's like a savant situation, and we are just testing well beyond grade level. And this is one of our indicators. We'd used it in the past. And so we're just kind of
wanting to make sure to be able to be consistent, and I need to be preemptive in knowing how many days prior to the actual window opening do I have that nimble ability, and then I need to shut it down.
We don't have a set number of days.
So it's same day. Same day up until the day before. I can do
Well,
that.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what data
Yeah.
we grab.
The roster.
So we
She
don't
would-
grab that data, you're the one, so we have the Neo roster, right, that's available for export. You can take
Yep.
that roster and then utilize it to roster your students, but you're the one at the district level that is rostering those students. We don't grab any data from the platform until the final day of testing. And that's
So-
when everything is pulled,
So
student data.
we can intentionally mis-roster her in NUIA through the end of the window then. And not have it cause a problem.
What do you mean by Miss Ross?
Yeah, why don't we table this and let's connect outside
I
of this
know we're not
call?
the only ones with the issue, but okay, yeah.
Is anybody else experiencing this issue? Because I don't want to take away like time that if there are others experiencing the issue, I'd like to address it, but I guess I'm not understanding why you would mis-roster the student during the assessment window if you're looking to assess the student off grade level outside of the assessment window. That's the disconnect for me, I think.
Katie, is that your hand? Are
Yeah.
you also impacted?
Well, no, I have a question because it's my first attendance this year. So I want clarification. So I told my folks that the winter window ends February 28th, as it says on NWA. So we are in the middle of doing all our testing. So when it was announced that February 11th was the last day, that confused me. And so I want to make sure I'm on the same page of what we're saying. In regards to what I think Erica is saying is, I asked Barbara, who is the liaison, about whether we can test in the spring window because the state test opens on May 2nd, but the spring window opens sooner. And can we test before the state test? And the answer was no from her. So I guess she said, no, you cannot. She checked with whomever. Because we were going to try to maybe do an early with some of our kiddos, early spring window and to see where they were. So that's what I'm asking.
So there's the broader window that's open, right? So that's the one, Katie, that runs through February 28th. But in order to keep consistency between instructional weeks
Yeah,
and then the administration of the assessment, that's why the winter window was identified of, the open until it closes this week. So that's why that was identified, to keep a consistent instructional week format in between the three administrations. Now, the state doesn't receive that winter data,
okay.
right? So it's not a huge deal if you test beyond that 2/11 date. But if you're trying to maintain the instructional weeks between the fall and the winter, and then the winter to the spring, these are the window of dates that you would want to administer the assessment. And it was structured in that way because we knew that districts would be required to take it in the fall and they'd be required to take it in the spring. And when we polled districts, over 75% said they were going to administer it in the winter. So we wanted to make sure we had that consistency throughout the three administrations, and then it wasn't just kind of all over the place. You know what I mean? When it comes to the spring administration.
I missed that, and that's on me.
So
I
you're
missed that.
all good with winter, right? Because
Right,
that's
so-
more of a local piece.
Right, so, but you give me a good thing that any 3 through 6 student who doesn't test till next week is a little outside that instructional window is what you're saying.
Yeah, a little outside, but I mean, if it's
Okay.
not, NWEA is informed as anything beyond a month, you
Mhm.
could see some changes, but
Okay, all right,
anything
so I
within
won't
that month,
panic.
you're generally okay. So you should be fine.
Okay, good. I was
And-
just like having a nervous, like, OMG, if I have to send out an email saying, but
No,
thank
you're
you.
good.
No, thanks
And
for the
then-
clarification. And then
Yeah.
because what we were doing kind of connected there, our EL students obviously are being bombarded because they had the NWA. So that's why I had asked Barbara whether we could test, because I was gonna hold off my ELL until right at the beginning of the spring window. And so when I asked if we could get in there, that was the answer from Barbara was no. You
Correct,
shouldn't.
because
Okay.
the spring window is set because that is part of the state assessment program. So
Right.
those are the specific dates that we do for the spring. But what you could, no, I was gonna say, you
Yes.
could, yeah, that's not gonna work.
So
I'll stop.
so we can't progress monitor in the spring to a degree, is what you're saying. Like, we can't do a first test early spring window NWA national before the DOE, the main state window of May. Correct?
Yeah,
I think this is where
Okay.
that questions are coming
right.
together. Like
Right.
Katie's question is definitely one that people ask me, and even in my own district. It's about the practice effect. Like, how many days do you have to wait in between administrations? And I don't believe that the DOE has a policy on that. I know we talked about it once, but maybe you do. But because I know it came up when people were ascribing text to speech to kids, they wanted to make sure that they were not bleeding into the actual test window.
and my understanding is that there are so many items in the item bank that there's the opportunity for nothing to ever be essentially repeated because it's adaptable. So a student could answer a question one way one day and completely different the next, and it's going to promote and direct the student to a different level potentially, or just even different strand of questions that are coming. So as far as duplication or exposure of content in advance of the actual assessment, I think that's going to be very minimal. But we can certainly take that question back to NWEA. We have weekly check-in meetings, so Nancy can add that to our agenda tomorrow to clarify, and we can include that in our Q&A document to make sure you have clarity on that, if that's helpful.
So maybe if I reframe my question, it will be easier. So if I put a child into NWEA off grade level, I can do that at any point prior to the close of the state window?
Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
No.
No, my gut
Right.
would be that you could do it prior to the opening
Open,
of the
right,
state
right.
window.
That makes a lot more sense to me, but remember in
Okay.
the old assessment, we had like a pre-rostering number of days before the actual administration began. And I just want to make sure that we're not grabbing a roster, or we're not putting somebody on a roster that is grabbed earlier than I intend for that child to be sitting there. Does that make sense? So I can just go forth and administer off grade level so long as it does not fall on
Fall
this.
within the window.
Okay.
Correct, right. So February 28th is the last day of
Yep.
the broader national winter window.
Yep.
You can, the spring window, broader national 3-month window starts the following Monday on March 1st. So you can test off grade March 1st
Yep.
through Friday, April 30th.
Yeah, so I
but
have
not
like our
starting Monday,
yep.
May 2nd.
instructional weeks evenly spaced and all that business. So on our side internally, if I just set my window a couple of days longer, then I can take care of those kids. My preference is prior to rather than after. Okay, I'm sure we're not the only ones trying to do this, so thank you.
Sorry for all the confusion. Just trying to make sure we have clarity, that's all. I don't mean to cause
probably
more
didn't ask
confusion.
really.
Okay, so if we're all set with that, I believe we have a question about the ESSA dashboard. Shannon, you said something about some of our corrections weren't addressed. Is that have to do with the dashboard, or does it have to do with something else?
I think that's you, Erica. You mentioned that the corrections weren't addressed.
Yeah, problematic a little bit because it's public at this point. Graduation rate being a big one. Yeah,
Okay.
so I did write in, but time is of the essence. I wrote back as recommended yesterday. I just want to have a board presentation, going to be encouraging the board to go to the dashboard tonight, and the data are wrong, and that's one of those tripwires for us. So
Yeah, can you forward me that email that you would have sent to
Yep.
Penny?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Not seeing any hands or anything else in the chat. There is some good conversation in the chat. But not really questions, so.
Anything else we can help address or any questions you have?
Jeanette, I'm wondering if you could stay on for just a second regarding that last question, because I just got an email back and it's not quite resolved and I.
I can do that for sure.
But just one last time, because thank you, David, for answering. So when the window opens for spring in March 1st, I can test students in that window before
Yes.
May 2nd. Okay, so what was
But Katie, it's
communicated?
not going to count as your state assessment.
No, I
right?
know
So-
that. I didn't want
okay.
it to count, but so
Yep,
Barbara,
you
I guess
can.
when I talked to Barbara, she wasn't clear then what I was asking.
Yes, so you can test. So
Okay.
as soon as March 1 opens, if you were progress monitoring a student, you
Right.
can test them between March 1 and, like Nancy said, was it April 30th, Nancy?
April 30th.
April
yes.
30th. So you could test them within that window.
Mhm.
And then as of May 3rd, I think the window opens. That's when the
Mhm.
state windows open. You
Right.
would have to retest the student to be counted for the state assessment.
Okay, so Barbara didn't understand what I was asking. So when I got the answer, okay, but good. No, I'm glad we clarified it. It will help me. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
That's all I see, Jeanette.
All right, then I will give you the gift of close to 15 minutes back in your lunch hour. We only take 20 minutes to eat, right? So, I mean, we all should be good. So enjoy the 15 minutes and we will see you soon. Thank you for joining us.